As a twin mom, making time for your marriage can be a huge obstacle. It can be really hard to focus on your spouse or your partner when you feel like you've given everything you can for the entire day to taking care of the twins. But it is important to make that time for your marriage if you want to keep it. Hi, I'm Josephine with Mom's Twin Guide. Today we're going to talk about making time for your marriage and some things that you can do to make sure that you and your spouse continue to feel loved by each other. The first tip that I have is to schedule weekly meetings with your spouse. And it needs to be weekly. Because if it's not, other things will wiggle their way into the schedule and push these meetings out. And once that happens, that's when you get into the habit of not doing them. And if your marriage is important to you, these need to happen. Being a twin parent is not an easy task. It is rewarding, but it is not easy. So, you need to make it a priority to schedule weekly meetings with your spouse. Now, these weekly meetings, they don't have to be super long. We usually schedule about an hour, actually exactly an hour. We schedule an hour every Sunday afternoon, and we do it during quiet time or nap time. So our twins are almost 5 years old now, and so they don't do a nap time anymore. They do quiet time, and this is something that I do every day so that they have 1 hour where they are in their rooms. They can read books, they can do puzzles, they can color pictures, but they need to stay in their rooms until quiet time is over. And I have an okay to wake light that has an alarm that tells them when it's time that they can come out. And I always try to do this quiet time while my baby boy, who's almost 2, is napping. On Sundays, if you have trouble having your kids stay in quiet time, feel like you could do a show during quiet time. Just have them in a different room than where you're going to be. We do all of our shows on our Chromebook, so with Netflix or Disney Plus, and so we just put that on the dresser in their room on those days and have them watch it there. That keeps them in their room and quiet so that we can have our meeting and focus on our marriage, which is very important. During your weekly meetings, some things you'll want to cover are your weekly schedule. So for that week, you'll want to look at a calendar and talk about appointments that are coming up that week, play dates, anything happening at work, or anything. It could be deadlines or any extra meetings. And then if there's sports coming up that week, just go over everything. Even if you think the other person knows, just go ahead and talk about it so that you both know you're on the same page. You can also set goals. Talk about what goals you have for your family, goals for the week, fitness, finances, any goals you have that you want to complete that week. Talk about it then. And write it down so that you can keep track. This is also a good time to talk about your dreams. Dreams about the future and retirement, those often go overlooked when you're stressed about kids and school and sports and everything else that happens when you are a parent of young children, any children. So talk about your dreams. Because if you don't dream now, when are you going to dream? When you're already at retirement age? You might have completely separate dreams by then. You need to talk about it. So this is a good time to just keep up to date with what your dreams are for the future. Even if you don't have the money to dream right now, or to fulfill those dreams, that's okay. This isn't for right now. Those dreams are for you and your husband to have for your future. Your future self will thank you for going over this. And then another thing that this time is good for is checking back in on previous goals that you set to see how you're doing with them. So what my husband and I do at our weekly meetings is we have a Google Docs document, and we write the date, and then we write down what we talk about. And then if it's something that we need to get done, so like a couple weeks ago we wrote down that we needed to call our CPA about our taxes, because we do use a CPA. We decided we'd rather pay somebody to do that work for us, and that money just comes out of, we get money back, so we just pay them. It's easy. So instead of spending hours ourselves doing that, we decided it's nicer. We feel better about paying somebody else to do that for us. So on our weekly meeting document, we wrote that we needed to talk to our CPA and schedule a time to meet up to give them all the documents they needed. And we said who was going to do it. So we put my name on that. Since I'm home with the kids, I have access to my phone all day. So when I called and set up that scheduled meeting, we went back on our next Sunday meeting. We looked back at that and we highlighted that in dark purple so that we know that's done. We don't have to do that anymore. So we have different colors that we highlight things. I don't know if color coding works for you, but it works for us. So that just, dark purple is what we're done with. So we don't have to look at that anymore. And then, we also talk about our budget, because we keep a strict budget, zero-based. Every dollar gets a name on purpose. We follow Dave Ramsey. So we get that all written down. And so we talk about our budget also. Alright, so that's the weekly meetings. Those are, in my opinion, one of the most important things you can do for your marriage. So don't skip that one. Tip number 2, and you probably know this, but it might not be getting done, is plan dates. So this one is hard even for us. We do our weekly meetings, but it is hard to plan dates, and that's something that my husband and I are still working on. But having a list of dates, things that you could do together for cheap or for free, is a good idea, because when you do have the chance to have somebody watch the kids, whether that be a babysitter or a family member, then you have an idea and you can just take off. Instead of having to figure out what you're going to do, spending all that brain energy and time to not get as long of a date. So we make a list. Ours usually looks something like play tennis, take a walk together, go on a drive together, exercise together. Our local community center on Tuesdays and Thursdays has open volleyball night for adults, and it's $2 per person. So that's one of the cheap ones that we include on our list. And that's easy. Like if we have grandma or grandpa over on a Tuesday or a Thursday, we could just take off with $4 and go play volleyball with a group of people, interact with other people as a couple, and it's great. It reminds us of when we were in college and we were around a bunch of people and playing sports together. You could also do cooking classes or a paint and sip. Now, both of those are things that you can do either going there in person or on YouTube. So we haven't done it yet, but we have all the tools we need. So all the paint and paintbrushes to do a paint and sip. And we have a YouTube channel that I follow that you can choose which painting, and then she walks you through it. And I've done 2 of her paintings before. This is actually one. Actually, they're both right here. And they always turn out really great. But, yeah. I don't consider myself a great painter, but I think these turned out great. So, she has some awesome painting things that you can do. And that's a date night that we'll do at some point when Grandma and Grandpa are here. Alright. Or we could even do that in the evening. Because you could stop the video and stop that and pick it up on like the following week on a different date night and keep going. The next tip, get a babysitter. Now, I know with the pandemic, it has been harder to find a good babysitter. You know, I don't know. To us, it's been harder. We had a babysitter, but she moved away right before the pandemic started, and we haven't found a new one yet. So we're looking for a new babysitter. But in the meantime, we use, our family comes over, and a lot of times they ask, what is something I can help you with? And we say, we'd like a date. So that's a great way to do it. Or if they don't ask what they can help you with, just ask if they'd be willing. Like, if you don't communicate, they won't know. So that's just how it goes sometimes. So you need to use your words to ask. I'm not trying to talk down to you, but I know that a lot of times I don't use my words, and then my needs or wants don't get met. So I'm working on that, and that's something that a lot of people need to work on. Nobody knows what you need unless you ask. And then another way to get a babysitter is if you have a friend who has a family, who has kids, trade off days of babysitting. Find somebody who will switch off. So, in my experience, doing this once a month does not work out. It would be great if it did, but it is one of those things where it has to be regular or it will be forgotten. So if you could find somebody who would do weekly, that's probably the best bet of actually making it happen, where you watch their kids the first week, then the next week they watch your kids, and you just trade off. And weekdays work better because weekends, people travel. That's a great way to do it. If you can't do weekly, maybe every other week, because then you each get a date once a month. And I really think that once a month is a good goal for dating. At least once a month. Now, if your marriage is in just a really bad place, weekly is going to be your thing. Having an actual babysitter and going on weekly dates is what will bring you back together. As long as you're doing dates that both of you enjoy, or you're switching off. So like, if your husband is all about basketball and he wants to play basketball with you and you're not that big into that, humor him for a week. And then the next week, you do your cooking class with him. He might not like cooking, but, switch off. And then find something that both of you enjoy. Now, if you're doing weekly, you will probably need to find a babysitter. There are Facebook groups, at least in my area, there's a local Facebook group that is dedicated to babysitters, and you could go on there and find a babysitter that way. Now, definitely interview the person, ask for references if you don't know them, and, still be safe about it, but that's one way you could find babysitters. And care.com is also a great way. I actually used to be a nanny before I had twins, and I found my nanny gigs through care.com. And care.com requires all babysitters and caregivers to have a background check, and it's not like one background check and you're done. Periodically, the babysitters have to pay to have a new background check done on them and uploaded to the system. So their background checks have to be clean, and I think it's a pretty good system they have. Care.com is a pretty good way to search. So to search for a nanny or a date night sitter. And then also ask family and friends in your area if they know of any good babysitters, because they probably do. Or if they don't, they might know somebody who does know. So word of mouth works great. Alright, and then some reminders. You and your husband are both tired. Both of you are tired and burnt out often. So try to stay away from the mindset of, I'm so much more tired than him. Or, I do so much more than him. Well, you might do so much more at home. You might think you're more tired because you run around with the kids all day. But he might be a different sort of tired. So he might be mentally exhausted if he sits at a desk all day and answers phone calls and works on the computer. So you might think you're more tired, but it's kind of hard to compare that. So try not to. You're both tired. You're both burnt out. It's just the stage in life you're at. Remember to communicate. If you need help, you need to ask for help. You can't just expect the other person to do it. They might not know. They're working on their own stuff. They might not notice. You might notice a lot more things about the house than your husband does. You might notice, if you're the one working, you might notice things that he's not noticing because he's doing all these other things. So, you need to ask for help if you need it. Also, you might have different expectations when it comes to things. So as an example, you might have different expectations when it comes to washing the dishes. Maybe you expect everything to be washed and out of the dirty side of the sink before going to bed at night. That might be what you expect. But he might expect that the dishes will get done when they get done. You do your best to keep up, but if something doesn't get done, that's okay, you can finish it the next day. And it all comes down to how you grew up. So that last example about the dishes, that's a big one with my husband and me. And I expect all the dishes to be done. But that's also his one job. Like, his job is dishes and trash. And then I do pretty much everything else. So I grew up, all the dishes were washed, the dishwasher was loaded, there were no dirty things anywhere before we went to bed. He grew up where things would just pile up, and then when it was piled up enough, they cleaned it all the dishes, which his mom cleaned it all. And there's different things that you'll find if you talk, if you communicate. You'll find that, they grew up, your husband grew up with different rules than you did. One of the things my husband grew up with was he wasn't supposed to load the dishwasher because his mom read the manual and knew exactly where everything went, and if anything was out of order, it would make her upset. So the kids did not load the dishwasher. Whereas I grew up, we put our dishes in the dishwasher after every meal. That was our job, and if we didn't do it, we got in trouble. So you're working with different different contexts. You're working with different things here. He grew up this way, you grew up that way. If you don't communicate, you're just going to be frustrated. If you guys are struggling with this, talk to each other about what your expectations are. The other person won't know unless you tell them, like, this is what I expect when I do this. But it's not happening and it's making me upset, and I want to know what your expectations are when it comes to this. Because there seems to be something different there. But you have to talk about it. You can't just get angry internally all the time and then just start yelling at each other because of that. You can't do that. It's just not the best way. You grew up with different parents. You will have different parenting styles. And this is good. Not everything is good, but this is good. Your kids will benefit from seeing both sides. They will learn different lessons from you than they do from your husband. But you have to allow some space so that your spouse can do that. They can parent in their style and your kids can learn from both ways. Now you do want to communicate again about certain rules that you feel are super important. And if your spouse is doing something that is not leading the kids to act that way, talk to them at that weekly meeting or afterwards in private when the kids are asleep. If you always tell them off in front of the kids, then it confuses the kids and it makes your spouse feel inadequate, like they can't do it, so they shouldn't, and they should just revert to you. So try to bite your tongue, not too hard, but try to keep it inside until you could talk to them in private. Another thing to remember is don't be afraid to find extra help from a counselor or therapist. You're tired. You are mentally tired. You are physically tired. And sometimes when you're tired, you need help seeing things from an outside perspective. Don't be afraid to seek help. It's not scary. The financial side might be scary, and we'll do a video on that in the future. But if you're struggling, it's okay to find help. It is a good idea, and it will help both your marriage and your family life, and you as an individual. So don't think it's selfish. Don't think you're any less for going out to find help. It actually makes you a better, stronger person if you are willing to find help when you need it. And both marital counseling and individual counseling are beneficial. So, maybe you feel like you guys need marital counseling, but your husband's not willing to do that. You can find individual counseling, and it might help your marriage, you might not be the one that needs to change, but by being open to this, you might be able to understand better the needs of your husband or why he acts that way, because you'll be able to talk to an outside perspective that can give you pointers. If you don't feel loved, your spouse might not either. If you don't feel loved, they might not feel loved either. So consider learning your love language. There are books on this. There's probably YouTube videos on this. But learn about your love language to find out what makes you feel loved as an individual. And ask your husband to do that also. Ask them to find out, to read the book, or however you did it, take the test to find out what your love languages are. Once you both have done that, talk about it. Talk about your love languages and find ways that you can help each other feel loved. And you can plan this into the schedule. So my love language is spending time together. But with twins and another baby and a dog and appointments and my husband working 2 jobs, a lot of times spending time together as a couple just doesn't happen. So scheduling these things like dates and weekly meetings, and we exercise 1 time a week together on Monday nights, scheduling those things into the schedule really helps me to feel loved. Because otherwise, he works, he comes home and puts the kids to bed with me, and then he works some more. And, we don't even talk. But with scheduling these things in, it makes sure that we take the time to sit down and talk, we take the time to exercise together, we take the time to go on a date and remember why it was we married this person. Find your love language. His is physical touch and words of affirmation. So like me telling him he's good looking and, rubbing his shoulders, things like that. That helps him feel loved. So we both need to work together to make sure we're feeling loved. And then my final reminder, doing things together as a family is great. And I definitely think you should do that regularly. But if you are spending all your time as a family with the kids and you're not taking time for yourself, you need to start prioritizing time for yourself. You need time to get away and reset. You need to focus some time on yourself. Now, don't do every day. Maybe every day. But don't just abandon the family to go take care of yourself. But you need to schedule time for yourself, to take care of yourself mentally and physically. Get out of the house. Go for a walk with a friend every week. Maybe an hour every week you go on a walk with a friend. You need that time with your peers. You need that time away from the kids. If you're a stay-at-home mom, you cannot stay at home with the kids 24/7, 365 days a year. You need to get away sometimes. Schedule it into the schedule. I cannot put enough emphasis on that. You need time for yourself. Schedule it in. Don't wait until you're burnt out and ready to throw it all away to take care of yourself. Take care of yourself now. Schedule it in. 1 hour a week. Get out of the house. Do what makes you you. Do not lose your identity just because you're a twin mom. Make sure you have at least 1 hour a week on the schedule on purpose that nothing else gets in the way of for you. All right. So those are my tips for making time for your marriage and yourself. All right. You got this. Have a good day.